I'm Melissa, and behind the camera is my lovely assistant and wonderful husband, Woody, and we're working on the Bon Appetit Blended Burger Challenge. The way the contest works is it's for home cooks only, and you make a burger that is meat mixed at least 25% with chopped fresh mushrooms, like regular mushrooms like you would get at the grocery store. And our big burger idea is the Fungue burger. It's got fungus, it's got fondue, it's fun, it's got goo, Fungue burger. It's gonna have a cheese sauce on it that's kind of between a Mornay and a fondue. Not so thin that it's falling out the sides, but definitely gooey and rich, messy, fondue-y, cheesy burger experience inspired by fondue. Today, because I hadn't seen the challenge yet when I grocery shopped, I didn't buy things specifically to start out on this journey, but I did have burgers on the menu, so I didn't have the things to do the sauce that we're going to do in our real recipe. And I didn't have fresh mushrooms, but I had canned mushrooms in the pantry. So what we're going to do today is do our first test run focused on just the flavor of the patty. Because we're gonna have to trial and error and troubleshoot this thing. We're gonna have to do a bunch of different iterations, and we'll focus on a different component each time as we develop the recipe. So here goes patty test 1.
Patty test 1, right there. You got it.
Okay.
So what's in this one, Melissa?
This has got a pound of ground beef. Just regular, plain old hamburger meat. This one is 85-15. 80-20 would work fine if that's what you have on hand too. Sometimes that's what I have. I've got 85-15 today. 5.5 ounces of mushrooms, just out of a can. Plain out of a can, stems and pieces. I cut these up with a chopper. In the real version, like I say, we'll use real mushrooms. Real fresh produce mushrooms, but these will give us an overall, is our flavor on the right track for today. And we're just going to dump them right in on the meat. I've got 2 cloves of garlic that I've chopped up real little. Dump it in the meat. A tablespoon of grated Parmesan, not the fancy one from the deli counter. This is the out of a shaker in the refrigerator department. Got a green lid, plastic container kind. Tablespoon of that.
Kind you'd put on your spaghetti or your pizza.
Exactly. One of the things that's kind of ingredient X in today's scientific test is better than bouillon, because we're really playing with how to flavor this thing. In this run, I wanted to test this out because I like all the flavors of bouillon, and I think that the better than bouillon beef bouillon paste will add more beefiness to the mushrooms. It will really beef up what we've got going on here, in addition to adding a little more flavor to the beef too. Beef and mushrooms kind of shine on their own, and the sauce is going to have a lot of flavor, so we're not trying to add a ton of intensity to this, but you know, it needs a little something to dress it up a little bit. I'm going to put a tablespoon of the beef bouillon paste right in there. And everything tastes better with a little salt and pepper. I don't need to add a lot of salt because that bouillon paste has a lot of salt on its own. Alright, now we just mix these together. We want it to be real homogeneous. You can really smell the bouillon.
Yeah, I'm over here behind the camera and it's coming out.
Yeah, there's more smell there. I may need to tone back the bouillon because it's a powerful smell. But it may just be the smell, and it's uncooked at this point too. We want to get this all thoroughly mushed together so that the mushrooms and the meat are just all one thing. That looks great. Okay. You want to shove that lovely meat there. Meat and mushrooms squished together. Now, we're going to do just like you would if it was a straight hamburger. And we're going to make some patties out of it.
How's it holding together consistency-wise?
This is a little wet, I think. I think that these will benefit on the next run from putting them in the refrigerator for a minute after we finished it. They're fine. They're pattying up. You can see they're pattying by hand here. I'm not having to do anything exotic to patty them. But it feels a little wet. You see, that's how I'm doing it. Real rustic patties here. Just pattying them out with clean hands. Get this skillet flaming hot here. I'll stop the skillet here. I'm using a cast iron skillet, and I'm getting it real hot. That's going to give us that initial sear on the bottom of our burger. I'm going to put a tablespoon of butter in the skillet as soon as I get it hot, because I worry that these burgers, with the mushrooms in it especially, will need a little more lubricant till they start to letting off their own fat, especially because we're not using a real fat hamburger here. I wouldn't even mess with the butter if I was using 70 hamburger, but using the 85-15, I worry that it's not going to seep out fast enough to lubricate itself, and I don't want it to stick. We've got the pan all lubed up. Now we're going to drop these bad boys in there. Hear that lovely sizzle. You're doing a great job of making them uniform. That one had me cinnamon.
We can work on that.
Yeah, but today's experiment is all about the taste. We're doing this experiment kind of inspired by the way Claire on Gourmet Makes does hers, where she tries things and learns from what she tries and tests out each part of the process and tinkers with it as she goes till she gets where she needs to be for a finished product.
Man, you smell that?
It smells great. The mushroom really shines through in the smell.
You can smell the mushroom and you can smell the beef bouillon.
Yeah, that mushroom smells great. I thought it would smell just like a hamburger. It doesn't. It smells...
it smells more like a beef stew.
Yeah, it smells delicious. Okay, we're going to let these cook for a minute. Looks like they are done all the way through. They're all brown. It's a little tough to tell because of the bouillon and the mushrooms, the color looks a little different than we might have expected. Might have expected a little pink, but they feel soft. They don't feel overdone at all texture-wise. Let's take a taste of it here. That's awesome. They're really good.
What's the flavor profile you've got there?
It's beefy. The bouillon is still detectable. It's not as strong as it smelled though. The Parmesan is not tasteable at all. We may need to crank it up. If you didn't tell me it was in there, I wouldn't know it was in there. But
okay.
The mushrooms taste great. The texture, spot on. Feels great in the mouth. I really think that this was a fairly successful test. I like what we have here. We're still going to try some other things and see if we like them better. But this wasn't a failure. We could roll with this and still be happy with what we've got.
Salt level appropriate?
The salt level is right. It's not real salty, but it does have a little bit of salt to it. I think it's about right. And when it gets with the cheese sauce that we have, because we're going to do a pretty intense but not real salty, more creamy cheese, I think that this will work good with that.
Okay, so knowing what we know now, what do you think is the next step?
Okay, the next step, the big variable is going to be using the real mushrooms. And I want to, in test 2, try a different patty recipe. Instead of use the bouillon, I want to leave the bouillon out and do the garlic and the Parmesan and throw in a little Worcestershire sauce, a little garlic powder, maybe onion powder. Do a more straight pantry spices, less is more preparation, and see how that goes. I think that'll be test 2 on the patty. Hi, we're back with a second installment of our blended burger test. Today we're going to test a different kind of patty. Last time the bouillon one was good. We could totally roll with that. But we wanted to try a different approach to a more less is more. Let's just let the ingredients really shine. The bouillon was pretty intense. So we want to see if something less intense is better or less good. So yeah, this time we're going to do a little different. And this time I was prepared. So we're going to do the mushrooms the right way this time instead of the canned mushrooms. I've got just sliced up portobello mushrooms. You could use the unsliced ones. The store just happened to have some that were sliced, and then I rinsed them in a colander. I'm going to pour them on a sheet pan here. And I'm going to take about a half a tablespoon of olive oil, drizzle it on them, and kind of toss them around in it, get it spread around. What we're going to do here is roast them to dry them out a little bit, mostly to increase the flavor. It really adds a taste to the mushrooms if they've been cooked a little bit rather than raw. It really brings out the nicest things about them. Toss a little bit of salt with them. Spread them out so that they're one layer thin so that we can get a good roast on them. We're not trying to steam them. We're trying to bake them, roast them. And I've got the oven already 425 preheating over there, and I'm going to stick them in the oven for 15 minutes, and we're going to let them cook. We got the mushrooms roasted, pulled them out of the oven. I'm going to get them in a bowl to chill, and then I'm going to chop them up. Okay, we chopped the mushrooms up. I used one of the slappy choppy deals, but you could use a knife, doesn't matter.
Slappy choppy, is that the official term?
That's the So, now we're going to dump the 5.5 ounces of mushrooms, and the 8-ounce pack cooked out to about 5.5 ounces on its own. When you took the water out, it worked perfectly. Dump that in with a pound of the 85-15 ground beef, the other teaspoon of salt. No one can do sweet burgers.
Some of that mushroom sweetness.
Yuck. Got a half a tablespoon of Worcestershire sauce, a tablespoon of dehydrated onions, the dried kind that comes in a jar in the spice aisle, 2 cloves of chopped up garlic, a half a teaspoon of black pepper, and we doubled down this time because in the last test the Parmesan was undetectable. We did 1 tablespoon. Today I'm doing 2 tablespoons, see if that makes it noticeable. And then we're going to squish them all together.
So the primary difference this time was no bouillon, double the Parmesan, and we used a little dehydrated onion.
Yes. And the real mushrooms.
Yes.
Not the canned mushrooms.
We're going to use the same cooking method this time?
Yes. We're going to put them in a hot skillet with a tablespoon of butter.
You think the real mushrooms changed the consistency any at all?
I don't think it really did. I think what we're going to notice is that they're going to be more flavorful because we're using the real mushrooms roasted freshly rather than ones that have been sitting around in a can. And we're going to patty these up with nice clean hands. I'll just make 4 equal patties here. Butter in the pan so that the patties don't stick. And then we will drop it in the pan.
That's good sizzle.
Very nice sizzle. There we go. We're just going to let it go. We pulled the beautiful burgers out of the hot skillet, and we're going to sit those on a plate under an aluminum foil to stay warm while we do our first version of the sauce. Okay, for the sauce, we're going to do somewhere between a Mornay and a fondue. We're going to start with 2 tablespoons of butter. We're going to melt that down. Because what we're going for is not as wet as like a queso. It's not going to be that wet, but it's not going to be a firm cheese either.
The idea being that it's gooey for our goo, but it's not making an absolute mess of things.
I want it to be wet and gooey and messy and decadent and luxurious like fondue is. But yeah, it needs to stay on a burger. It needs to not make a burger you want to eat with a spoon or in a gloves. Okay.
So what's the basics of this? How does this work?
What we're going to do, it's very much like the way you make the sauce like for macaroni and cheese, where you get your butter to make your fat and you melt it down. And then you're going to drop in 2 tablespoons of flour, and you're going to whisk that together. And you're going to let that cook for just a second so that the floury taste gets off of it. We're not trying to fully cook it, but we want to give it a minute or so that it doesn't taste raw. You're going to start smelling that good smell. This is very much the same step you would use like at the very beginning of a gravy too, where you're mixing your fat and your flour.
So what are the other components? What kind of cheese are we using?
We're using Swiss. And I'm not using a fancy Swiss. I'm using just the regular Swiss from the cheese aisle. I'm not using a deli Swiss. Okay, we got that ready. Now I'm going to pour in a half a cup of heavy cream. And a half a cup of milk. We're whisking these together real good. You want to combine this stuff a little on the slow side so that you're getting all your smoothness there.
Yeah, you don't want to wind up with a bunch of lumps.
Right. I'm going to use the shredded Swiss. You could use the one on the block and shred it yourself too. Okay, now to get that real fondue taste, something we're doing that's very different than your basic mornay or your macaroni and cheese goo is we're going to put in a quarter cup of white wine. I'm using such Chardonnay. You're going to want to go with something dry like that, something oaky.
Yeah, you definitely don't want to use a Moscato or something like that in this.
Nothing too fruity. Alright, see, this is thickening up here. We got our, it's starting to be kind of gravy-y.
Oh, yeah.
We're going to let that cook for a second, kind of burn the alcohol off a little, because we want the alcohol taste, but we don't want it to hit you right in the face.
Right.
We're not going to cook it long enough to cook it all out, but we're not going to put enough on any of them either to have a feel. It's going to be like fondue is. Okay. Now, we're going to turn our fire way, way down. And we're going to stir this cheese in. I'll melt this cheese.
I think the combination of the Swiss and the Chardonnay is going to give this a lovely, mild nuttiness to it.
It should. And this is smelling very fondue-like. You can smell the hint of wine and definitely that Swiss smell. I'm going to let this cook for a sec to get just a little thicker, I think.
Mm-hmm. What else are we flavoring this up with?
Here at the end, we're adding a wee little bit of salt. We don't want it to be real salty, just a little. And we're going to add just a sprinkle of pepper. Again, just enough for a flavor. We're not trying to make it real peppery. And a teeny bit of nutmeg.
Yeah, a little of that goes a long way.
Yeah, it doesn't take much. Just a little. See, just a little. You can see a few flakes on top.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Adds kind of a depth to it. Makes it a little more interesting.
Going back to the macaroni and cheese reference, that's something that's not uncommon to use in a cheese sauce for macaroni and cheese.
No, it's not. I don't put any in there when I do it. That would be where I would put in the dried mustard.
Mm-hmm.
But, yeah. And that probably wouldn't be terrible on a burger. That's not what we're going for. We're going for fondue. Now, got our sauce here. Just gonna spread the sauce on.
Oh yeah, look at that.
That is really delicious looking. And we'll stick some tomatoes on it. Lettuce. In the final recipe, we'll use arugula, but I had lettuce today, so.
Yeah, that's fine.
Slam it shut. And
Open that sucker up there. Oh yeah. You've got that burger fully enrobed in that gooiness.
And we're not spewing too much out the sides here. That's really good. That is delicious. The flavor of the burger maybe a little light this time.
The flavor of the patty itself.
Yeah. And I think we may want to reduce just a little longer before I put the cheese in on the sauce. Get it just a little bit less wet. But I think the flavor is there. Yeah, it's lightly winey, deeply Swissy. I think that's working. After having eaten them fully assembled as a meal, we've had some thoughts about it. For next time, I think that this burger, the patty itself, the texture was absolutely spot on perfect. And it was a good patty. It tasted good, but it tasted a little dull and plain. It was mushrooms and beef. And those are great ingredients and they taste great. But we want it to have a little more liveliness to it. So we're going to put the bouillon back in next time at a reduced amount. We're going to divide it by about half. And we're going to take the Worcestershire sauce out because with the umami from the bouillon, you just don't need the Worcestershire. It won't be detectable anymore. And the Parmesan was still undetectable, even with doubling it. So we're going to go big or go home. We're going to put a 1/4 cup of Parmesan in next time. If it's still untasteable, that means we're going to cut it. That it's not, Parmesan just doesn't taste in a burger. But we'll see. Maybe we can get it to be tasteable. And that's the only changes we need to make to the patty. The changes we're going to make to the sauce is we're going to add a clove of garlic in the butter step to give it that, like in the fondue when you start and you run the garlic around your fondue pot. We want to give it some of that. And then we're going to put twice as much cheese. We're going to ramp the cheese up big time because we want it to be even cheesier flavor-wise, but also mostly goo-wise. It was a little bit wet.
More gooey, less saucy.
Yes, it was just a little wet, and I think that it was just still a tiny bit tame. I think we can go harder, and it will be better. Little more to what the sauce was good, but I think it could be better. I think next time those tiny little adjustments will fix it. So today we've got the patty test 3 and the Fungue test 2. We have made the edits that we talked about last week, adding back some of the bouillon, going heavy on the Parmesan in the patty, and going double the cheese in the fondue. So I'm going to jump right to the assembly here. got a beautiful patty. Lovely texture. I like that it's a little thicker today.
It is.
That cheese really glued it up. Let's cut her open there, take a look inside.
Oh, that's beautiful.
It's holding together all right. That's a lovely looking patty. Not a lot of goo escaping. This got some goo escaping on the outside, but not real bad. Let's see what she tastes like. That's spot on. I think we may have hit it this time. The little bit of bouillon added back to it fixed our dull burger problem. And I think the cheese is more vibrant too. And we added a little garlic to the cheese too, and I think that bumps the flavor of the sauce up a little. Yeah, I think this may be our final recipe.
Did Parmesan come through in the patty this time?
It did. I can taste it.
Excellent.
I think all of the edits we made are the right edits. Today is our big finale for the Bon Appetit Burger Challenge. We got our recipe right last week, got it down pat, everything we wanted. The only things we changed this week are some little bitty cosmetic changes, like we toasted the buns and we used these fancier deli buns instead of the cheap bag buns, and we used leaf lettuce instead of iceberg lettuce. And this is the finished product that we're going to submit for the Bon Appetit and Mushroom Council Blended Burger Challenge. I'm going to cut this open so we can take a look inside too. And it's as beautiful inside as it was outside.
Oh, yeah. Very nice.